Well, I'm here, you friendly, aggravating, Danish, old idiot. I am going to aggravate you guys a little bit. I'm going to talk about why it's not GNU/Linux. Yeah, and you're already angry at me. You already started to go into the comment section and telling your opinion and be like, this is why it should be like that, and I'm buying into the philosophy of the Free Software Foundation, or I believe in the Linux, sorry, not Linux, the Linus God of all, and all of that crazy shit that you guys are and girls are coming at me in the comment section for, and you go nuts. It's entertaining. I need a laugh. We kind of have to understand a little bit about the politics to some extent, but also the dynamics of Linux and the GNU project. So if you go way back to like the 70s and 80s and 60s and stuff like that, Richard Stallman worked on, or wanted to do, an operating system, of course, and he made a lot of tool, or paid people to make a lot of tool, to basically make a GNU operating system, so to speak. And he made a lot of tool sets. All of those tool sets that we are using in Linux today, the GNU tool sets, before Linux was used on Unix systems. They were used on Solaris, they were used on plain old Unix and stuff like that. Back then, he didn't have the feeling or the need to call Unix GNU Unix, or call Solaris GNU Solaris and stuff like that. So bite a little bit into that, because Unix and Solaris and other Unix-like systems, even FreeBSD today, which you don't want it to be called GNU/FreeBSD, are using a lot, sometimes more than Linux GNU tools, depending on the distribution. But yeah, he built these amazing tools that we, or paid people to. The GNU project, the Free Software Foundation, made these amazing tools that we are using today. Love them. I love that they did it. I have nothing against that they did that. I just don't like Mr. Stallman as a person and his political views and stuff like that. But I can appreciate and I can love the tools that he provided us that we can use. Love it. But they didn't do the kernel. Well, they kind of worked on the kernel called Herd, which was like basically a microkernel. And Linus Torvalds did his kernel thing. And they basically merged. They had some beers, they found out that they liked each other at the bar, and they took each other home, and the rest is history. Linux became part of GNU, or GNU became part of Linux. But it was always called Linux. It was always been called Linux. Nobody really cared that much about Linux. Like, if you think that, let's just say Linux is 5% of the computer market today, the desktop market, back then it was no percent of the desktop market at almost, or definitely no percent of the server market. So nobody really didn't care about Linux at all. So he didn't really mind it that much. He promoted Linux, Linux promoted GNU. They were kind of like friendlies. They have different viewpoints on how to do things in the tech space and different political views. Fine, they were still friendly with each other. Then Linux starts to become popular. You know, Linux started to get a lot of recognition. Linux started to get known. More known than GNU. Now the problem set in. If you go watch it's not long. I have a video called either it's Linux versus the Free Software Foundation, or the Free Software Foundation versus Linux. Richard Stallman in there, I took a clip out from an interview. I'll see if I can link it down below that video, where he say why he wants to be called GNU Linux, and it's simply this: Linux took too much spotlight away from GNU and its political motives, something to that nature. So basically, Linux became more popular than GNU. Richard Stallman Richard Stallman and the Free Software Foundation, because he say it's not him, he say it's the organization, but let's be honest, he's controlling that with an iron fist. They got a little bit butthurt. Why is Linux more popular than we are? Why are people talking more about Linux than we are? So to kind of force people to recognize GNU, to force people to talk about GNU, he now wanted it to be called GNU/Linux. To me, that's not good. That's a really bad way of doing it. It smells of jealousy. It smells of pettiness. It smells a little bit about ego also, but mostly jealousy. If the GNU project cannot stand on its own feet and get recognition on its own feet without Linux, it's not doing a good enough job. Is GNU tools a massive part of Linux? Yes. But it's also a massive part of other operating systems. Why is he not pushing it there? Heck, there's even GNU tools in macOS. Why don't he want macOS to be called GNU/macOS? Because he don't really like macOS and proprietary software and stuff like that. That's another crazy talk we can go into. So if you think about it and look at it from that timeline, it's not a good fucking look. I understand why he wants to do it. He wants people to talk more about GNU and their political endeavors. I get it. But he's doing it in a really, really bad taste. He's doing it in a really, really bad way that makes him look, or make the organization look, petty, jealous, and disingenuous. He should be focusing on making sure that GNU is talked about without Linux. Because GNU is being used a lot. You can get GNU tools for fucking Windows. It's not Linux exclusive. But it's the fact that more and more people started to use Linux, more and more people starting to talk about Linux, and then they didn't really care that much about the GNU tools. That should also tell you a little bit about society. Do they really care about GNU? Do they really care about the GPL? Not really. They care about what Linux provides them as a platform. And I talked about this a little bit in other videos where I call Linux a cheap Unix, where basically a lot of people are using Linux that would otherwise have been using Unix because it's free. And a lot of times it's cheaper for companies to submit code back and fix bugs themselves than paying a massive fucking license to X, Y, and Z Unix license holder. Because Unix is like, I think, don't quote me on this, this is just what I reckon and remember from the early days of like the 90s and early 2000s, and the articles and quotes I've looked at over the years, also recent years, is that Unix costs more to license than Windows, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. But Linux definitely is way cheaper to run servers on and stuff like that from support agreement and license agreement than both of those systems. Like massively more inexpensive. So yeah, if you can run Linux that gives you the same thing for almost no price at all, or like a third of what Unix costs, they're going with Unix. They don't really care that much about the license, because they have probably ran Unix before running GNU tools, and they probably also submitted code back to the GNU people why they were running Unix. Richard Stallman got a little bit butthurt, to be honest, but he don't want to admit it because pride and ego sets in. But I think he got butthurt, and I would respect him so much more if he was like, yeah, we work really closely with Linux, we have a really great relationship with Linux, but I'm kind of a little bit sad that we don't get the recognition that Linux do. It kind of makes me a little bit, bummed out that Linux is running away with all the limelight, and we are this big part of Linux, and nobody really talked that much about us beside a really core audience. I would respect the living fucking shit out of that old man with the long beard and eating his own fucking skin than I would anyone else if he said that, because that's how he feels, and he's right. He is right. Linux did run away with the limelight. Linux is being talked about way more than the GNU. But what he does instead is childish, it's petty, it smells of jealousy and egoism and stuff like that, is that he wants people to just call it GNULinux. Why not work on making GNU more recognizable? Why not do a bigger PR push for GNU without attacking Linux and demanding the Linux community to call it this and that? I don't mind people calling it GNULinux. I just personally think it should not be done, or it should be optional at best. Optional at best. If you want to call it GNULinux, call it, but the way they look at it is that everyone should be calling it GNULinux. That's what I don't like. Had he just been like, hey, if someone comes up to him and say Linux, I'm like, hey, I understand you want to call it Linux, but wouldn't it be okay if you just call it GNULinux when you talk to me, because we are a big part of Linux, and I feel that we are losing a little bit of, recognition here. So it would really mean a lot to me if you would call it GNULinux. Or if people are making an article about it, and it's like, hey, I know you're writing an article, can you please call it GNULinux? It would mean a lot to me if you will do that. Way different than saying, oh, it should be called GNULinux, and let me correct you, it's GNU/Linux. You see those two approaches there? one makes you want to do it, another one is like, who the fuck are you telling me what to do, you old fucking idiot? But anyway, I hope this little spiel here made you kind of get a new understanding or viewpoint of why I draw the conclusion that it should not be called GNULinux. Because they kind of are forcing it onto us, or it's charged with pettiness, jealousy, and stuff like that. And I know a lot of you people will disagree with me, but this is just my opinion. And it's done in a really non-tasteful way, I think the word is. So I hope this gives you an input into why I think this and why I say Linux and not GNU Linux. See you all later. Bye bye.